The Saab 95 was released as a replacement to the Saab 9000 in 1998. By this point, more than 3 million Saabs had rolled off the Saab production line, and the Saab 95 was the biggest of the Saab cars to ever have been produced. Almost 500,000 Saab 95s were produced between 1998 and 2012. With the first generation of Saab 95 being created between 1998 and 2010, and the latest generation, the second generation, of created between 2010 and 2012. Some interesting facts for you about the Saab 95. Ventilated seats made their first appearance ever in a Saab 95, which isn't surprising really, because Saab actually were the first ever car to have heated seats back in the day. Saab's active head restraints were also a first with the Saab 95, and that was where if you had an impact from the rear, the headrest would shoot up and out and would catch your head to protect you from any whiplash as your head went back. The night panel, which allowed for all of the instruments to go dark except for the speedo, was first introduced in the Saab 95. But to be clear, it did exist before the Saab 95, but it was called black panel. But the terminology night panel was first coined in the Saab 95. This fine specimen here is the very first of the Saab 95 first generation, and it's easily recognizable by the windscreen wipers on the headlights here, the chrome separate grille that it has here, and the protruding rear bumper, among other things. And inside this car is probably one of the best looking dashboards of any Saab. The Generation 1 is one of my favourite dashboards. It surrounds the driver and it's covered in buttons. It is like sitting in a cockpit. That's exactly what it's like. And when I first got my first Saab 95 first generation, which was over 10 years ago, this is one of the things that really drew me to it. It does feel like you're in a spaceship or a plane. And at night, it's like Christmas. It just is amazing at night. One of my favourite items on the dash is the SID. The screen itself really makes a statement and houses all of the usual trip computer data, along with an alarm clock, speed warning, and all the usual radio info. Then you have the quirky cup holder making its first appearance. The sound system in these cars is great. It has a great stock frequency range, and you get your CD and cassette players. And then of course you have the option of a tilt and side sunroof with a blind. These seats are something special as well. No car, including Saab, has anything near the comfort of these seats. They are literally the best that you can get. The engines were evolved from the 4 cylinders used in the Saab 9000s, and you had a couple of options at the launch of the Saab 95. You had the turbocharged 2-litre B205, which output around 150 brake horsepower, and you had the turbocharged 2.3-litre B235E, which put out about 180 brake horsepower, and then you had the 3-litre V6, which was only available with an automatic gearbox, but it put out about 200 brake horsepower. A year later they brought out the Performance Aero, often referred to as the Hot Aero. HOT was the abbreviation of High Output Turbo, and it included the B235R engine, and it outputted around 230 brake horsepower. The torque was immense, and in terms of acceleration it could get to 60 in less than 7 seconds, and it was famously reviewed by Jeremy Clarkson, who said that it outperformed a Porsche 911 between 40 and 90 miles per hour in terms of acceleration. In 2002, the 95 had its first subtle facelift and was updated with a front grille redesign where the front grille was one piece with the bumper. It had a slimmer plastic bumper trim on it and pop-up headlight sprays on the front. And on the back of the car, the tailgate was also modernised along with the lights. It also received better steering and a new type of adaptive airbag. 2002 also marked the time that the Saab 95 had electronic stability control as standard. It was also when the first diesel engines were released, and they released the Hirsch upgraded B235R, which exceeded 300 horsepower. There was 2 variations of diesel engine in 2002, which weren't available in the States. They were the 2.2 litre turbo diesel from Vauxhall Opel, which put out around 120 brake horsepower. and the 3-litre V6 turbo diesel from Isuzu, which put out around 175 brake horsepower. And these were far more economical than the petrol variants. A couple of years later, in 2004, the Aero's B235R engine was upgraded to 250 brake horsepower. Up until 2004, the Saab B205 and B235 engines suffered from an oil sludge problem that led to the engines not getting enough oil. When Saab improved these engines from the Saab 9000 variant, they overlooked the implications of increasing the compression and blow-by. With the original crankcase ventilation system unable to properly evacuate the gases, the oil would become contaminated over time. Once that happened, sludge would appear in the oil and it would lead to oil starvation of the engine. This could be avoided with frequent oil changes, but unfortunately Saab also increased the interval changes for oil from 6,000 to 12,000 miles, which led to people not refreshing their oil frequently enough, which expedited the sludging in the engine. So if you have a Saab 9.5 from before 2004, make sure you change your oil frequently with synthetic oil. And if you're not sure about the history of it, drop the sump and have a look and see if there's any sludge in there. Fast forward to 2006 and the 9.5 received its second and most aggressive facelift, along with some major updates. The front here has been completely redesigned. It's more rounded and the headlights have these chrome surrounds which look a little bit like glasses, hence the nickname Dame Edna. The rear of the car has become more rounded and the tail lights are now fully red. So the exterior updates for this facelift were controversial. It was a little bit like Marmite. People either loved it or hated it. I've grown to love it over time, but that wasn't the only major update of this car. The second thing is the dashboard. Around this time, both the Saab 9.3 and the Saab 9.5 received facelift updates, and you can immediately see the prominent SID screen that was always on the dashboard of both the 9.3 and 9.5 has now gone. In the facelift here, they've incorporated it into the instrument cluster that you can control with the steering wheel buttons. You've also lost the screen for the climate controls, and instead you have this more modern dial-like structure. So the whole mission control cockpit style with all the buttons on the dashboard is no longer. It's more plain, although to be fair, it does look a lot more clean and modern. But I found with the stock head units, there was just too much dead space on the facelift dashboard. For that reason, I installed a 10.1-inch Android unit. Another thing that has been updated are the seats. They are still extremely comfortable, very similar to the pre-facelift, but they've received an update. You get some two-tone colors and they just look a little bit more modern. Also, the car's a little bit more plasticky than the pre-facelift. Although that doesn't, for me, take away from the overall quality feel of this car. It still feels like a quality machine. It still feels like a Saab 9.5. I love it. So this is a top spec Aero model and it's got all the toys. Barring one, I don't have ventilated seats in this car. But I do have the sunroof, which is very, very rare for this particular car. And I've got heated seats, heated rear seats, foldable mirrors, auto dimming mirrors, cruise control, the awesome Harman Kardon audio system, which really does sound amazing. Lots of bass from the 6x9s and the door speakers without the need for a subwoofer. And of course the awesome 2.3 litre B235R engine. Saab also increased the track width of this car and added wider tyres and shocks. So the handling of the car is a lot better. You still can't really throw it around as much as you would a Saab 9.3, but it is definitely better in this car. One thing about this car is, I'm traveling at 60 miles an hour at the moment, and the road noise is significantly less than in most other cars, including the newer second generation Saab 9.5. And then there's the power. The Aero model, which is what I'm driving at the moment, has a further increase in power for the B235R engine, and so it's now 260 brake, and it still shifts. The car makes the adrenaline rush, because if you imagine, the weight of this car is not light, it's a heavy car, but the engine can easily propel the car to 60 miles an hour in about 6 seconds. Which brings us to the very last generation of the Saab 9.5. Up until this point, Saab 9.5s didn't look or feel like any other vehicle. They were Saabs, and that was it. The Saab 9.5 second generation, however, is very, very different. You have to remember that when the 9.5 was revealed in 2009 at the Frankfurt International Auto Show, GM had lost interest in Saab. At the point when the car was actually being built, GM had already sold Saab to Spiker, and there were extreme budgeting issues to the point that Saab employees were not getting paid. It has so clearly borrowed features and design styles from the Opel Insignia or the Buick Regal in America. This engine is the 2-litre turbo diesel, which is also found in the Vauxhall Insignia and other Vauxhall cars. The drivetrain and the gearbox are also identical to what you would find in the Vauxhall Insignia. These wheels are found on the Vauxhall Insignia. This car is a classic example of where GM has literally taken a Vauxhall Insignia and changed the body and the badge. That's not totally bad though, because I actually really like the design of the Saab. I think it's actually quite a beautiful thing, especially the rear end of this car. It is one of the best designs that I've seen on any car. So this car's got some cool features. It was the first one to have keyless entry, push button start, and electronic handbrake. These are all very basic functions, but this car was the first Saab to have all of those things. Also, the first thing that you notice when you get in the car is the sheer amount of space in here. It feels enormous in comparison to the other Saab 9.5s. And then if you look at the dash, you start to see the other Saab styles, such as the vents, the turbo gauge, the night panel button. So that's pretty cool. And then if you've got the top end of Saab 9.5, you can have things like all-wheel drive with electronic limited slip diff, adaptive ride control, adaptive cruise control, lane assist, and a bunch of other toys that were available with this particular type of car. My one here has the basic heated seats and satellite navigation. The instrument cluster is pretty cool in this car as well, because you're presented with a circular screen in the center of it, and when you're driving along, one of the features is that it looks like a gyroscope from an aeroplane, which shows the speed in an animated fashion as you're driving, which is pretty cool. Moving along to the center console, which is very stylish, I must say, in its brushed metal feel. Underneath the center console armrest, there are 3 buttons, and if you press this one, the armrest jumps forward and up in a really nice motion. The second button opens up the main cubbyhole, and inside the main cubbyhole is a USB port and a 3.5mm jack auxiliary input. This last one opens up the smaller velvet top of the armrest. The brushed metal here can be pushed in, and then you are presented with some cup holders and another 12-volt cigarette lighter here. So no fancy cup holders in this car. And in the back here, again, I have loads of leg room. It's very, very roomy back here. And the highest end models of 9.5 have things like screens on the back of the headrests and climate controls on the actual center console. But this is a very basic Vector model which doesn't have all of those features. Right, let's take it for a drive. So this car drives completely different to the first gen Saab 9.5s. Now I'm not going to do a direct comparison because the first gen that I have is an Aero and this is a Vector with a diesel engine. But just the feel of the car is completely different. In particular, the noise. I'm not just talking about the noise of the diesel engine, which is prevalent as I'm driving along, but also the road noise that comes into the cabin is significant, and it's certainly louder than the first generation. It's probably one of the loudest ones that I've seen. So high-speed driving on the motorway and you're going to notice a significant amount of road noise, and even at low speeds then you've got the diesel engine, which you can hear quite easily through the firewall. The other thing about this car is that the clutch is quite heavy. And reading on the forums, it appears that it's quite a common thing for the Insignias which have this engine to also have a heavy clutch. And that makes the driving experience a bit of a chore when you're in traffic, having to completely depress the clutch. In comparison, my 9.3 convertible, which is also a diesel manual, is a pleasure to drive. It's very, very light clutch, and navigating traffic with it is not difficult. But this one, yeah, you just have to put a bit more pressure on it than I would like. And then there's the seats. Gone are the luxurious best in class that you got with the first gens of 9.5. They've been replaced with these ones, and you do get additional stuff with these seats, like electronically controlled lumbar support. So you would think that it would be comfortable, but unfortunately I find that long journeys result in me getting back pain, and that's not great. Then there's handling. So I like to drive enthusiastically sometimes, depending on my mood. And when I throw the car around corners, it handles it a little bit differently to the Dame Edna. Like, you can feel where the limitation of the traction of the tyres are. So it does lean a little bit more than the Dame Edna does. But yeah, it just doesn't feel as defined as the first generation of 9.5s. It isn't the same animal. It doesn't feel like a Saab when I'm driving this. Even the new generation Saab 9.3 diesel that I have feels like a Saab. It drives like a Saab. This car, even though it is clearly a Saab, it's a disappointment. That's what it is. It is a disappointment. I'll keep it because it's a Saab, and I want to restore it to its former glory and keep it on the road. It's quirky. So my perfect car would be a mashup of these three cars. I'd have the exterior of the second generation 9.5 because it's awesome and it's unique. I'd have the interior from the first generation pre-facelift 9.5 because it's like mission control and I love it. And then I'd have the engine from the facelift first generation, the 260 brake horsepower B235R. That would make my perfect car. It would be exactly what I would love to drive. Massive thanks to Simon, who actually lent me his first generation 9.5 so that I could make this video. It's actually been a load of fun making this, so I hope you like it too.